Hey folks, Dust here, and I guess it's time to talk about Cloud9 again, as North American Counter-Strike talks have been kind of a staple of this YouTube channel, and now we have another reason to talk about the North American team Cloud9, as it was officially announced yesterday by the Cloud9 Twitter that the reports from DK and Nell and such were indeed on point, and Sticko will be remaining on Cloud9 for now. Of course, he already filled in at ESO1 Cologne, but he will also now be staying with Cloud9 going into E-League Premier, and for a new fifth to replace the recently departed Tarek, they have picked up Golden, the former in-game leader of Fnatic, to lead the team at E-League Premier in perhaps the foreseeable future, depending on how things go. So we've been kind of knowing about this for a little while, but now it finally has the official Cloud9 stamp on it from their Twitter account. So I thought we would kind of talk about this and just talk about Cloud9's chaotic situation in general. Because, of course, Cloud9 had, built up a lot of hype and really had everyone in the North American scene's hopes up. Because towards the end of last year, they were putting together some really good results. They're getting some top fours, like at ESO1 New York and E-League Premier. The E-League Premier event was particularly impressive because they beat NIP, beat G2, and really went toe-to-toe at the Strauss in a best-of-3, where they took a map and lost one map really, really close. It was a Super 6 series. They almost went to the finals of that event. So that was a particularly impressive result, kind of building up towards the end of the year. Then they wound up winning a couple of events on home turf at DreamHack Denver and iBuyPower Masters. Grant, the fields weren't so great at those events, but they were still taking care of business and taking home trophies and building themselves up a little bit. And then at IEM Oakland, they took top 4 again, being able to beat SK as well as Gambit. And then at ECS, they were actually able to beat Team Liquid, but then lose to FaZe. And really losing to FaZe was the pattern throughout all of this. Got knocked out by FaZe at ESO1 New York, only won a combined 7 rounds across 2 maps, so they got absolutely curb stomped by FaZe at the first meetup there at New York. Then they got eliminated by FaZe again at IEM Oakland. A little bit more competitive, but still a pretty one-sided loss. Only a slight improvement to their meeting at ESO1 New York. And then they got 0-2'd by FaZe again at ECS. Again, a little bit better, still pretty one-sided though. So FaZe was ultimately their kryptonite, though they had proved that they could go toe-to-toe and perhaps even beat some of the other teams that were kind of in the top 10 or are approaching the top 10. And so they were doing some good stuff. And then obviously E-League Boston rolled around and they won the whole damn thing. Crazy run. After being on the verge of elimination, losing their opening 2 games to G2 and Space Soldiers, they come back, they beat VP, they beat Astralis, which was super sick, they beat Vega Squadron, they make the playoffs, they come back from 0-2 to 3-2, then they beat G2 and SK to make the finals, and then they meet FaZe, their ever so brilliant kryptonite, and they wind up beating them in this crazy magical best-of-3 series where they lose the opening map 14-16, but then are able to win the second map pretty well and then win the third map in double overtime, and then obviously make huge history by being the only North American team to have won a major, and one of the few times North American team has really even won a Tier 1 event. There's only been, I think, 3 occasions of that, really happening, so crazy stuff. And then, obviously, the aftermath happens, where directly afterwards things were fine. Summit, they took second, losing to Liquid in the finals, which that is no shame. Liquid was also building themselves up towards the end of the previous year when they were doing really well at Mykonos and New York and things of that nature after the player break. And so they were already on the rise and looking pretty strong. And they had beat Team Liquid early in the tournament, but then just lose them in the best of 5 in the grand finals. But then things started to dip from that point forward pretty severely. They lost to SK and Mousesports to get eliminated in groups of the Star Ladder Season 4 finals, as well as losing to FaZe again. Again, these were all teams they were capable of beating during the E-League Boston period, but could not replicate that when it came to this event. And they usually had a pretty good record against Mousesports, even dating back. But again, could not get it done here. Go out in the group stages. Pretty disappointing loss when they're off the back of the major win. Then they go to IEM Katowice, where again they lose to Team Liquid and FaZe. They had some wins over Renegades and Tyloo and SK. They took 5th, 6th. Not too bad. Again, Team Liquid was on the rise. FaZe, one of the best teams in the world. But again, these were teams that you did have some wins on previously, so it does seem like you're fading a little bit. And then the ultimate disappointment, though, is WESG, right? Where they get knocked out in the quarterfinals by Team 1. Like one of the Brazilian teams that hadn't even broke out of Brazil yet, weren't on the same level of an SK or some of these other Brazilian teams. Certainly have some talent on the team, some young players who can frag pretty well. Not like they were just complete weak players or something like that. Certainly there was some talent there, but still, for a team that had just won a major and was beating the elite teams of the world at one point, or going toe-to-toe with them at least and being very competitive, to drop a series here is just crazy stuff. And this is when Stewie 2K takes his departure. And this is where the chaos really begins, because they're going downhill, the results are definitely tanking, and now people are starting to jump ship, and Stewie 2K was the first one. Then they bring in Finesse, and they have him for 3 LAN events. They take him to Marseille, that's his debut with the team, and they basically are able to get out of groups because they were able to 2-0 FaZe and G2, but then they obviously get eliminated by Gambit in a very disappointing fashion in the quarterfinals. So you had this really cool high of finally beating FaZe again and beating G2. And yeah, FaZe is going through standard situations, but still proved to be very strong throughout all of that. And it's looking pretty good. And then you lose to Gambit. And I mean, come on, man. Like, Gambit was playing fucking musical chairs with of in-game leaders for several months between basically their full lineup other than Mo, and then, C's in and out. And it was just a mess. And so to lose this team was definitely a little bit rough, but the only kind of saving grace was, it's Finesse's debut event. Didn't have a lot of time with the team yet. Maybe that comes into play. Maybe that's why they just weren't prepared. They weren't ready yet. But, I mean, it's not like Finesse was ever given any more time, because they were immediately on the road again, basically playing back-to-back tournaments, going to IM Sydney, where they take losses to Tyloo and FaZe. The only teams they beat were Order and Greyhound, which, fair enough, losing the FaZe, again, that's been a constant problem for Cloud9 and a constant problem for a lot of teams, honestly, up until super recently, when Navi was finally able to take care of them, and a couple other teams have beat them here and there, like, Fnatic actually had beaten them last year at... what was that? I am Katowice. So it's been done, but, it takes the best teams in the world, like in Astralis and these other teams. But, again, losing to Tyloo definitely is a little bit of a stab here. And then they go to the EPL Season 7 finals, where they get blasted by FaZe again in a best-of-1. And then they beat Sharks, but they lose a map, and then they get eliminated by Heroic, a team that was also having their own roster problems at the time. I think Chroman was filling in at this event because Rubino was out, and they had just recently brought on Freiburg, so it's not like that team was well put together yet they take a loss there. And then they decide to kick Finesse after that. And now I've already made a video about the whole Finesse situation, which you can check out on the YouTube channel if you want like a more detailed thoughts on the situation. But to quickly sum it up, it just seems like a bunch of bullshit. Like, the statement that came out after Finesse got kicked was, our visions just didn't line up about the future of the team and the strategy that we wanted to use, and we just weren't on the same page strategically. It's like, well, shouldn't you have figured that out before you signed him? Shouldn't there have been some meetings to be like, hey, Finesse, thunderstorm going on outside, so you may hear some of that, my bad. But anyway, maybe that's like God smiting me for making fun of Cloud9 being North American. I don't know. Not really making fun, but criticizing the fact that, you should figure that stuff out before you sign him, right? I mean, you should really know what his plan is, what he wants to do, and whether or not that lines up with your own philosophy on the game. And then if you do decide to go with him, you got to give him ample time, because the reality was they were constantly playing online matches, like 2 or 3 online matches a day. They traveled to 3 events, essentially back to back to back. There was never really any time to practice, never really any time to innovate or implement anything new, and so it just seemed like he didn't really get a fair crack at it. Sure, you can debate whether or not he should have been signed in the first place based on his experience and individual performances, but once they did make the decision to sign him, I think you have to see it through properly. I don't think they really did. I think he kind of got the shaft here, and so that is definitely concerning. So then once they kick Finesse, he still stands in for them at ECS, which is obviously quite awkward, where you're already out the door, but you have to fill in because there's no one else Cloud9 can get in time. And they immediately get knocked out by Astralis and Fnatic at this tournament. Again, good team, particularly Astralis, so it's understandable, especially given the situation with Finesse. But yeah, you're not gaining any ground. That's really the problem, isn't it? You just keep slipping. You keep getting knocked out early in tournaments. And then they finally do find a replacement for Finesse, which is Sticko, who has only stood in for 1 event, which was ESO1 Cologne, where they lose to Astralis and Navi after a best-of-1 win over NiP, and they get eliminated in groups. And I guess in the context that Astralis is like the best team in the world and Navi goes on to win the whole event and was a solid top 3 team coming into Cologne, it wasn't that bad. Like, you're still not losing to chumps, like you're losing to elite teams in the world that are amongst like the top 5 or certainly top 10, definitely top 5 in the case of Astralis and Navi, top 3 really. But again, you're still not getting any ground. Things are still super chaotic. Things still aren't solidified. Sticko's on loan apparently from Esports. You're not even sure you want him to be one of your permanent 5. And then Tarek jumps ship after the event and goes to MIBR to follow Stewie 2K. And so it's just like, well, shit. Like, it's just a revolving door at this point for Cloud9. Not only can they retain their core members, but they're having trouble also figuring out how to fill the gaps that have already been created. And then now that new gaps are being caused in the midst of all of it. So it's a very chaotic situation, very dark time for Cloud9 at this point. And that leads us to our latest announcement, where Golden is going to be coming on board. And of course, Golden comes off the back of some success leading Fnatic, obviously winning the IM Katowice event where they beat Team Liquid and they beat FaZe twice in a best of 3 and a best of 5 that won all 5 maps. They won WSG, which wasn't as impressive because the field wasn't as stacked, but still took care of business, got a trophy, and had a top 4 at Marseille. The really only dark mark was that Starlighter Season 4 event where they went out in groups. But other than that, they had been even kind of rising up with some top 4 finishes last year at some different events. Only, again, kind of like Cloud9, was FaZe really the one that stopped them from doing more than that. So, yeah, good stuff under Golden's leadership. And I mean, when you watch Fnatic play, when I was watching their demos and stuff, I mean, they were well coordinated. They used utility really well. They had some good pacing changes. Even though they didn't do anything super complex or innovative, they did the basics really well. They had great timings. They played off of each other properly. They were synced up really well. And they displayed really nice disciplined Counter-Strike that worked really well. They were able to get back to playing some type of structured play rather than just extremely loose stuff. I think Mirage was the biggest example where they got away from just doing fast splits all the time and playing super loose and got more to a default mid-control focus, which is what they kind of thrived in the past. And you started to see some players come online. You know, Crims in particular was an absolute monster for Fnatic, really dating back to the end of last year to the present. Like, just fantastic player again. Really, you know, had a resurgence in his career when it comes to individual form. Flusha had 2 really big events for Fnatic when they were winning some of these titles. You know, Lekra was doing his job. JW was starting to pick up a little bit as well. And listen, I can't sit here and give Golden all the credit for all of this. In fact, there were rumors that even came out that maybe he wasn't calling as much as we thought he was. But I think it's a little bit naive not to give him some credit, because it seems like Crims has played his best Counter-Strike in more structured versions of Fnatic compared to the more looser ones where his numbers kind of dipped off, and someone like Olaf really was the one who kind of stepped up and took the sunlight or spotlight, whatever you want to say there. So yeah, I feel like you have to at least give him some credit here. But with that in mind, and with that knowing that Sticko's staying, which we've already seen him play a bit, we know that he's, you know, a serviceable support rifler is really the best way to sum him up. And even that's a bit of a stretch because his numbers have been pretty poor the bulk of the time that he was on Mousesports as a support player. You can certainly understand why he was on the chopping block. Granted, though, he still does his job. He still does the bitch work. He still helps create space for other players. And that's something that can't be taken for granted. You know, he definitely at least does his job and helps support his team. And there are maps where he does have pretty good numbers. There are times where he can step up and play well. It's not like he's a complete boat anchor or a burden on your team. He can be sometimes. There have been some series where he's just missing so much that it feels like his team is just playing without a fifth. But there's been other series where I've seen him pop off a couple of good maps and look really good. So he's not going to consistently put up numbers for you, but he's going to consistently do his job, and he's not going to take up many resources of the team, which will give plenty of room for other players to thrive, hopefully. So this is what we're left with now. It's Golden, Sticko, and then the core that is still left, which is Unimatic Rush and Skadoodle. Now, I put out a hot take tweet on the move when it first came out, and I'm going to stick with it and kind of defend it a little bit here, which is the only way this team works is if Skadoodle steps up big time. Because here's how I see it playing out. You're not going to be able to expect many numbers from Golden, but hopefully he can at least lead well. The only things that could stop him from leading well are obviously like language and cultural barriers. That could be a problem. Maybe calling in English won't be as easy for him as calling in Swedish. So that's something you have to kind of keep an eye on. If he can work past that, though, I mean, I'm not sure how good his English is. I've never really spoken to him. I've seen him do interviews. It seems fine, but you never know how it's going to work in-game, in the heat of the moment, when things are popping off, things are chaotic. You know, that's when it becomes very apparent that the language barrier could be a risk factor. But if he can work past that, as long as the team actually trusts in him, hands him the reins of the team, lets him do his thing and what he's most comfortable with, you know, then hopefully Golden can be the in-game leader this team needs. So that's kind of the conditionals on the Golden situation. As far as Sticko goes, I've already kind of said it. Service support rifler, you're probably not going to expect him to be a big carry or anything like that, but he'll do his job. He'll probably play the spots no one else wants to play. He'll be the one doing the dirty work, and he's willing to do that. And so that can be very helpful on a team to give room to other players, because I think that one of the big problems for Cloud9, even though they worked past it to win a major and some other good performances, is that you had so many aggressive prone riflers on the same team at the same time, and so therefore some people were going to have to make sacrifices. Rush was probably the biggest one to do so, as far as giving up spots and roles he normally played on terrorist sides, for example. Now, that's not going to be the case, because Golden should very clearly be an IGL that's willing to give room to his star players, and Sticko is very, much a support player, so he shouldn't really be taking up much room either. So this should set up, for Unimatic to just stay Unimatic. Keep doing the things he was already doing. Keep in his comfort zone, and keep performing consistently like he has been for quite some time. Been one of the most consistent fraggers for Cloud9 throughout the last year or so. Fantastic player, great fundamentals, smart guy, can help with leadership if need be, has led before, knows the game really well, definitely seems at certain points in his career to have the work ethic. I'm not sure if he's still as motivated as he used to be, but it seems like he's the guy that can be, the one to grind out hours and be there and ready to perform. And so hopefully he can just kind of stay the same. What I'm hoping happens is that Rush gets some of his old optic spots back. I mean, people need to remember that this guy used to be a star-level player in the North American scene, a great entry fragger for Optic back when they played their swarm and trade style they were so effective at to win E-League Season 2 and had some other big results. It's because Rush led the way as an entry fragger and had people like Tarek and maybe even Mixwell when he wasn't opping follow him up and open up bomb sites. Hopefully he can get back to doing a lot of that rather than playing the periphery of the map, just playing kind of like aggressive lurk spots, which is what he did a lot of the time on T-sides. And I think that's a lot of the reason why his numbers fell off, because he had to just give up a lot to the other players and just kind of, do what was required. So hopefully he can get away from doing that now. With Tarek and Stewie gone, this is a perfect time for Rush to kind of step up and fill some of those shoes that those people have left behind and get back to being a mad fragger. At least I'm hoping that's what happens. So that means that you should have Unimatic and Rush online, performing well, playing spots they want to play, taking up the room that they want, and being star players for this team. With Golden and Sicko more supportive elements, or Golden being the leadership element. But the X factor is going to be Skadoodle, because you can't just trust on Unimatic and Rush to just carry every game. You might win some games that way. You might do well in the NA scene and online league play by Rush and Unimatic just carrying, and maybe like Sticko and Skadoodle just doing decent enough. But if they want to be a true contender again, and if this 5 is really the long-term plan, then that means Skadoodle has to step up big time. Now, look, I think that some people have been overly harsh on Skadoodle's performances. Listen, there's definitely been times where they haven't been good. And yes, there definitely been some tournaments where he's completely, tanked and just his numbers have been super duper poor. But there's a few things to understand about Skadoodle. One, when he was on the team that won E-League Boston and that team that was, doing really well throughout 2017, the original Cloud9, or not original, but original from last year when they made the changes with Tarek and Rush, there wasn't much room for Skadoodle to do a whole hell of a lot. Remember, we just talked about how they have a bunch of aggressive prone riflers. So it's really hard for an operator like Skadoodle to take initiative when everyone else wants to. Like, Tarek wants to go make a play. Stewie wants to go make a play. Unimatic is going to be Unimatic. Even though Rush is playing, more supportive stuff sometimes and kind of playing on, like, the edges of the map or whatever, there's still going to be times where he wants to pop off and make a play. So, I mean, what is Skadoodle supposed to do? I guess at E-League Boston, he did still take initiative anyway, regardless, and did go out and make big plays, and actually, in some eyes, was an MVP player. Certainly did play super well at E-League Boston. So there's certainly times when that didn't matter and he still stepped up. But the norm is that there's a bunch of other fiery, personalities and people who want to take initiative on the team. So him fading back to the shadows just made sense, I think. And I think it's been that way for a little while. I think there's been other times where Scott has stepped up when he needed to, and he did perform really well. And listen, even tournaments where he did badly, he was still going positive. It's not like he was dropping like negative 50 KD and just like being an absolute boat anchor for Cloud9. There were a few tournaments where he played pretty bad. Don't get me wrong. It's not like all the criticism he gets is not fair. A lot of it is fair. You know, because even if you are going to be more supportive and not take initiative, you still have to get the kills you're supposed to get. And there were certainly games where he didn't do that. But there's plenty of tournaments where he went like +5, +10, kind of middle of the pack player. And that was fine for the lineup that he was on. But it's not going to be fine anymore. You know, now he has to get back to realizing, hey, like I'm one of the big three for this team fragging wise, like I was in 2015. You know, back then it was the fact that Freakazoid was like a serviceable entry who was a good role player, didn't always produce numbers, but what he did do was create space for Shroud, who was like the second entry, who was a big number producer for that Cloud9 team. And then you had Nothing, who was kind of a wild card because all the other roles were so well defined that he kind of just float around and make plays, and he performed really well. And then Skadoodle was that other guy for this team. It was really more Shroud and Skadoodle were like the huge duo, and then, you know, Nothing was kind of the X factor, the third that could come in and make big numbers happen, especially if Freakazoid wasn't having a good game. So he needs to get back into that mindset of, hey, I can't take a step back anymore. Hey, I can't just sit in the shadows and support while these other star players on my team, you know, take up resources and shine, and I just kind of back them up. Like, no, now he needs to step back into the spotlight, because guess what? Rush and Automatic can't carry this team alone. Like, Skadoodle has to produce good numbers alongside these two players for this team to have enough firepower to be a true contender. You know, like, unless Sticko is just going to hit a whole new level and produce super big numbers next to Rush and Automatic, but I don't know that's going to happen. And if Sticko's willing to play support and Golden's willing to give room to his star players, this is the perfect situation for Skadoodle to come back into the forefront of the team and be a big frag producer again. And if he can't, then, you know, if you're going to stick with Golden as a leader and Sticko as a support, then maybe more changes are going to have to be made. So that's the way I see it. I think Skadoodle is still a capable player. I think he's proven it. It just hasn't been anything consistent. But I think a lot of it may have to do with the fact that the composition of the team didn't really facilitate him to do that. Now, it could also be a character flaw on his part that he doesn't still step up and take initiative anyway, you know, but also it's nice to have someone who's willing to take a step back if you have a bunch of star players on a team to kind of be more supportive, so, you know, people can kind of do what they want to do, and people that you trust in to play. And I've talked to Skadoodle personally, so I know this was his mentality on the former Cloud9 that had, you know, all the star riflers in the North American scene. He kind of knew who he was playing with, what they wanted to do, and then how he could kind of be the glue to kind of fit in and fill whatever gaps and kind of play more passive if need be. So yeah, I think I have like a little bit mixed feelings about people's criticism of Skadoodle. I think in some places it's, you know, accurate. I think in some places people are overlooking the situation a little bit and maybe reading too much into the past and kind of holding on to old information in some degrees. Like when people say he's too static or something like that. I don't think that's necessarily true anymore. Anyway, that's really going to be about it actually for this video. Just want to talk about Sticko and Golden coming in, kind of talk about, you know, Cloud9's chaotic recent past and kind of what their presence looking like, and maybe a little bit about their future. To sum up, again, I think that this Cloud9 team could be good, but a lot of things have to go right. Like Golden has to somehow mesh in well as a leader, and then, you know, Rush has to be able to thrive again, has to take up, you know, the boots of the people who have left and, you know, get away from, you know, being a support guy and getting back into being a star level entry type player. And then Skadoodle has to come back online big time. He has to get back to his roots of being like an actual carry fragger as opposed to being kind of a guy just sitting, you know, in the shadows kind of supporting his team. So there's a lot of things I just said there that have to go right for Cloud9 to be a true contender again. And I don't know if they will or not. You know, and if not, then Cloud9's in a lot of trouble. I mean, yeah, you could try to poach energy players, or you could try to look for young, new, upcoming NA players, or you can try to go international even more than you already are, bringing in people like an Esperano or a Chroman or some of these other names that are out there. Sure, there's options for talent out there, but it's starting to get to a pretty grim state for Cloud9, and we'll have to see how they bounce back from it. So thanks so much for tuning in. Catch you next time.